Most people complain about their job. Long hours, bad pay, annoying co-workers. But at least your job doesn't involve standing in a swamp and letting blood-sucking parasites feed on your legs. At least, I hope it doesn't. For most of human history, the job market looked very different. Some roles were so unpleasant, so dangerous, or so strange that we eventually invented our way out of them entirely. Imagine trying to explain your job to someone from 500 years ago. You sit in the chair, stare at a glowing screen, press buttons all day, and somehow money appears in your bank account. To them, that would sound ridiculous. Then again, some of their jobs sound just as ridiculous to us. Here are 5 jobs that used to be completely normal and are now completely gone. Number 1. Leech collector. Before modern medicine, doctors used leeches for almost everything. Headache? Leeches. Fever? Leeches. Feeling a bit off? Leeches. The logic was simple. If something was wrong inside the body, removing blood might help. Same thinking behind bloodletting. Same thinking behind most medicine at the time. The problem was supply. Doctors needed a lot of leeches, constantly. So someone had to go get them. That someone was the leech collector. The method was exactly as grim as it sounds. Collectors would wade into ponds, marsh, and cup them feel the leech. The something would bude them, drop them in a bucket, sell them to doctors. That was the job. Human bait. Some collectors did this every single day for years. The repeated blood loss left many weak and exhausted. There were reports of collectors collapsing in the water. A few drowned. And yet, it was a real career. Leeches were valuable. Demand was high. If you lived near a marsh and needed money, this was a genuine option. A terrible option, but an option. Number 2. Plague doctor. When the Black Death swept through Europe, entire towns were devastated. Some estimates suggest it killed between 1/3 and half of the entire population. People were terrified. Entire families vanished within days. Cities desperately needed someone willing to enter infected homes, examine the sick, and try to help. Most sensible people wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. So towns began hiring plague doctors. Many weren't even properly trained physicians. Some were inexperienced, others were volunteers. A few simply couldn't find other work. They were given a contract and sent into the middle of a catastrophe. Their uniform became one of the most recognizable outfits in history. A long black coat, leather gloves, a wide-brimmed hat, and the famous beaked mask. The beak was stuffed with herbs, flowers, spices, perfumes. Because at the time, many people believed disease spread through bad air. The smell of death itself was thought to be dangerous. So if you breathed through something that smelled nice, you'd be safe. The herbs did nothing. Ironically, the mask and heavy clothing did provide a small amount of real protection. Not because anyone understood why. Pure luck. The plague doctors still got sick. Many died. They carried long wooden sticks to examine patients without touching them. In some cities, they were forbidden from leaving infected districts entirely. They ate, slept, and worked, surrounded by the dying. And they kept showing up. Whatever you think about their methods, the job required a kind of courage that's genuinely hard to imagine. Number 3. Resurrectionist. In the 18th and early 19th centuries, medical schools had a problem. Teaching anatomy requires bodies, real ones, and there weren't enough. The only legal source of cadavers in Britain came from executed criminals. Medical schools needed far more than the law could provide. Students were being trained without ever properly studying the human body. The demand was enormous. The legal supply wasn't. So the market found a solution, an illegal one. Enter the resurrectionist, also known as the body snatcher. These men dug up freshly buried corpses and sold them to medical schools. A fresh body could be worth a week's wages, sometimes more. Professional gangs emerged. They worked quickly. A grave could be opened, emptied, and restored before sunrise. Families realized what was happening. Some began hiring guards to watch over graves. Imagine being so worried about grave robbers that you hired security for someone who was already dead. Iron cages were fitted over graves, enormous stone slabs, churchyards built watchtowers. None of it fully worked. The resurrectionists adapted. The practice only really ended after the Anatomy Act of 1832 expanded the legal supply of bodies. Almost overnight, the business collapsed. The resurrectionist vanished. But their existence helped push governments toward modern medical education. History is full of strange debts. Number 4. Gong farmer. Every city produces waste. Today we have sewage systems, pipes, treatment plants, entire networks hidden beneath our feet. For most of history, none of that existed. Human waste collected in large underground pits, cesspits. Eventually, those pits filled up, and someone had to empty them. Unfortunately, someone always did. That someone was the gong farmer. The job was exactly what you're imagining. Workers climbed into cesspits, shoveled out the contents by hand, loaded it into barrels, and transported it away, usually at night. The smell was overwhelming. The danger was very real. Cesspits produced toxic gases. Workers sometimes passed out underground. Some never came back out. Despite all of this, cities depended on them completely. Without gong farmers, waste would accumulate until entire neighborhoods became unlivable. They were only allowed to work at certain hours because nobody wanted to see it or smell it. The workers often lived in separate parts of town because the stigma followed them everywhere. People needed them but didn't want them nearby. The pay was actually decent. Dangerous, disgusting work tends to pay better because fewer people are willing to do it. Eventually, proper sewer systems made the job obsolete. The gong farmer disappeared. But for centuries, they were the invisible infrastructure holding cities together. Invisible, essential, and almost completely forgotten. Number 5. Knocker-upper. Before alarm clocks became cheap and reliable, waking up on time was surprisingly difficult. Factories expected workers at specific hours, trains ran on schedules. Oversleeping could cost someone their job. So people came up with a solution. They hired another person to wake them up. This person was the knocker-upper. Every morning, long before sunrise, they walked through the streets, visiting their clients one by one. Some knocked on windows using long bamboo poles. Others tapped directly on the glass. A few used pea shooters, firing dried peas at windows until the customer woke up. Then they moved on to the next house, and the next, and the next. Now, the obvious question, who woke up the knocker-upper? The answer is surprisingly funny. Sometimes they simply stayed awake all night. Sometimes family members woke them. And in certain places, knocker-uppers actually woke each other up. A whole chain of professional wake-up calls stretching across entire communities. One worker waking another, that worker waking another. And eventually, thousands of people starting their day because of a carefully organized network of people whose entire job was knocking on windows. It sounds absurd now. At the time, it was completely practical. Then alarm clocks became cheap, reliable, available to everyone. Within a few decades, the profession was gone. Not because the workers were bad at their jobs, but because the world changed around them. None of these people were strange. They were simply doing what made sense in the world they lived in. The leech collector was meeting real medical demand. The plague doctor showed up when everyone else ran. The resurrectionist filled a gap the law had left open. The gong farmer did work cities couldn't function without. And the knocker-upper solved a problem with the tools available. Every one of these jobs sounds bizarre today. Every one of them was completely normal then. Which raises an interesting question. What jobs exist today that future generations will find completely absurd? Will they look at office work and wonder why millions of people spent their lives staring at screens? Will delivery drivers, cashiers, customer support agents sound as strange to them as leech collectors sound to us? Nobody knows. But history suggests one thing. Normal doesn't stay normal forever. The world changes, and eventually, even the most ordinary jobs become museum exhibits. Thanks for watching.